right. The good interviews are always scheduled for such a short period of time, aren't they? Christina Baker Kline is on the phone. She's been with us before. She is such an outstanding writer, a journalist, and a contributor to the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle. So she's got both coasts covered, plus Psychology Today, something called Lit Hub, and she's got a new book. It's called A Piece of the World. This is a fictional memoir. I'm educated. I've seen the picture before, the painting Christina's World. Mm-hmm. Right? Am I saying the name of the painting right?
Yes.
So I mean, I don't know anything about that. It's just I remember. I guess a famous painting somehow creeps into your consciousness somehow, without even knowing how. Christina Baker Kline. Again, the book is called A Piece of the World. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. It's delightful to be here.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I am just outside of New York in Montclair, New Jersey, 10 miles from the city. That's where I'm calling you from today, and I'm doing today's my pub day, and I'm doing a big event tonight in New York City.
Oh,
super.
Well, that's exciting stuff. So where did this idea come from? Were you looking at the painting in a museum and you said, what is that woman's story?
I know, isn't that a good question? Okay, so first of all, I grew up in Maine, about an hour, just over an hour from where that painting was done. As you know, my name is Christina. My grandmother and my mother are also named Christina, and my grandmother grew up in a very similar way to the woman in the painting. She was raised in a farmhouse, rural America, no amenities, no heat, running water, electricity, lights, or anything, and she had a sort of polio-like illness as a child, the same way that the woman did who was featured in the painting. And for your listeners, I guess, who don't know the painting, let me just quickly tell them. It's this iconic American painting that hangs in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. It's a woman in a pink dress sitting in a yellow field looking at this gray house. Her back is turned to the viewer that sits on the top of a hill right on the horizon line that's kind of mysterious. In fact, I did an interview recently where the guy said, I always think of the movie Psycho and that house in the movie Psycho. And I thought that was not so far from, this house is very odd looking and mysterious, and Christina herself is kind of odd. You don't know. It's this young woman sitting in the field, but as you look closely, if you look more closely, and by the way, you can just Google it and you'll see a million images, Christina's World, you notice that there's something strange about her. Her limbs are sort of twisted in a strange way, and she doesn't seem to be quite healthy. You're not sure. So I grew up with, seeing this painting, obviously, and my father took us on a little trip. In fact, speaking of the New York Times, I just wrote an article for the New York Times. If you go to the Times, you'll see it on their homepage this weekend, which is about visiting the Christina Olson house. And the Times did this funny cartoon illustration of my family visiting the house.
Oh, no.
It's cute. It's adorable. It looks nothing like us, but it's adorable.
Are you crawling through the grass? Is that what's in the picture?
Exactly. We're sitting having a picnic, which we actually did. Right where Christina sat in that painting. So, but anyway, so that was my early kind of connection with it. And then, I wrote this novel, Orphan Train, which came out a few years ago. And in that novel, I spent a lot of time in looking at rural America, hardscrabble life, for really poor people in the early 20th century. And I learned a lot about what it meant to live then with as I said, with nothing, basically. And so I thought I wanted to stay in that time period, and that's how I began thinking about it. And then a friend mentioned that this painting, she had just seen it at the Museum of Modern Art. She said, as an adult, this was a couple of years ago, she said, for some reason that painting reminds me of you. And I was like, I have found my subject. That is what I'm going to write about. I knew that minute. So
wow. So the book reflects, is Christina a real person in Andrew Wyeth's, am I saying his name right? In his life, the artist?
Not only was Christina a real person, everything in my novel, all the facts are true about their relationship and about how he felt about her and how they interacted, and also about her life. So I did a ton of research, historical research, to make it as realistic as possible. I did the same thing for Orphan Train. I just felt a lot of responsibility to the facts of this story.
That is fascinating. Oh my gosh! You know how many people go wherever that painting is actually hanging. You're going to get more. Where is it hanging?
It's at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City.
Oh, it's in New York. Okay, so you're going to have more people showing up at the museum just to see that painting.
Yes.
Well, what's funny? This is a whole other conversation. We don't have to have it now, but That painting is hanging in a hallway next to a bathroom. They don't know quite how to handle it because it doesn't quite fit into their collection. And I was talking to a curator at another big museum who said it's such a shame in a way that for example, if the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston had it, they probably would build a wing around it and they would contextualize it with other American painters from the same time period. As it is, Christina's world even though it's one of the most popular paintings at the Museum of Modern Art, it's got an ignominious place there.
Wow. So, how many paintings did he do of Christina?
He did 300 paintings of her and the family and the world. And, he was there for 30 years. He basically moved in the summers. He loved to be there and painting. And she just let him come and go as he wanted. He just would literally walk in the door and paint all day long and then row home at night and then come back the next morning. He did that for 30 years.
Oh, so she really did have polio then?
Oh, she really did. It was not actually polio. They didn't diagnose it until after her death, which was sort of heartbreaking. But it's a disease named after some French physicians. It's called Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And you know what is interesting? I discovered a video online of a woman named Bernadette. The video is called Bernadette, who has that disease now. And so I was able to see it, and she was filmed over a number of years. I was able to see what it really looked like to have that disease and how she got around, and I used that in the book.
Wow. Oh, God, you have just fascinated us in a short period of time. The book is right here. If I have somebody who would like a copy, this is one I definitely want to read for myself, though.
Oh, certainly.
But I'm going to give this away. I'm going to get it for Kindle. It's available on Kindle. Is it a Kindle book?
Like it.
Is it a Kindle book?
That's right. Of course.
Okay.
It's an everything book. You can listen to it if you want to.
Call me right now if you want the hardcover that was sent to me, and I'll leave it here for you. The rest of us, including myself, will have to buy it. So one website I have for you is ChristinaBakerKline.com. Is that right?
.com. Yeah, and it's Kline. And at my website, people can find all kinds of extra materials. If there are book clubs reading it, there's all kinds of stuff that they can get there about the book and how I wrote it.
Well, the way people are going to gravitate towards your book, the MoMA in New York is sure going to move it out of the hallway and really have a very special place for it.
I hope so. That's my goal.
The one thing I'm fascinated with is how this story came to you and how you decided this was going to be a book. Does that always happen? Is that always the story behind the books, where something just like out of the blue hits you like lightning?
Well, what I think I did with this novel, which is what I've done with all of my books, is we all live for a long time. I mean, we're all there are many stories in our lives that you don't really think of as interesting until or unless you're a writer, and then you want to write something that touches you emotionally. I mean, at least I do. When I write novels, with Orphan Train, it happened to be my husband's grandfather was featured in this article on Orphan Train writers. Who knew? Nobody knew that he had, ridden on a train as an orphan to North Dakota. Wow. And so with this book, it was the same thing. I found something in my own story that resonated for me because of my past connection with it. And I try to do that, as I say, with all of my books.
It's almost spiritual or psychic or something.
It's fun. That's the fun part of being a writer.
This is the fun part about doing radio shows, by the way, is guests like you. Christina, thank you so much for being on with us.
It was a delight.
We'll be right back.
Paddock Mall Studios. This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The Department of Homeland Security out with new orders the White House calls a big immigration launch. One proposal calling for fast-tracking deportations.
This is going to call for the